pondering this idea of RPG myths. I quite like to challenge these things, and recently talking about swingy D20s, and I don't know, I think the reason I like to challenge them is I think you get these misconceptions and ideas floating around that muddy the waters if you're into game design and maybe hacking rules and trying to make your game better. You sort of think about this stuff, and if you can get it really clear in your head, I think it's helpful. It helps you answer some questions, clarify what you're trying to do, and kind of just move you forward. And the misconception type stuff kind of holds you back or gets in the way, or like I say, muddies the water a little bit. So the example being, I was just talking about the D20, questioning some of the thinking and what I regard as maybe a popular consensus. It seems like quite a lot, you get people talking about games, and if you get enough people saying a similar thing, it almost becomes like this unassailable or unquestionable truth, because it's been heard so much. Yet the kind of like the evidence is not there, or it's not really been thought about. It's just kind of regurgitated ideas that go round and round, and they form into something more substantial than they really are, in terms of, whether the idea is, correct or not. Obviously, some things are more subjective than others, but one of them that keeps cropping up for me, and I just don't feel I've ever got to the bottom of it, it's as though whenever you talk about it, it somehow gets a little bit hijacked, or we get dragged back into the same old pattern of thinking and discussion, and it doesn't really move on. And the subject is this idea of the legs of a game, what gives a game replayability. And I guess the kind of the commonly held sort of, what I understand to be the commonly held opinion is that somehow this is related to how much you've got in your rule book, in terms of, be it rules or be it fluff setting. I don't know. I don't really support these ideas, so you'll have to excuse me if I'm not totally clear with them. But yeah, somehow the more pages in a book, there's more substance. Clearly there's more something, hence the pages of books. And the other one is advancement and character advancement, whether that really is a factor or not. I think is it way more complicated? I just think this discussion is barking up the wrong tree, and that's what I want to talk about. So before we go nuts about this and go, oh, Spike Pete, you don't know what you're talking about, I've got to say, let's just count to 10 and think about it. What has this got to do with system? All right, you got to define system a little bit, and some game books are going to help you out. But the reason they're helping you out is because they're giving you inspiration for cool stuff. So what I'm going to say is, I think you are only limited by a few things. You've got to have time to play. You've got to have players. It's got to work with their schedule. And we all know that's probably number one that's going to finish up your game. Number two, is your game, and I mean it not necessarily number two, but number two in terms of, this is the second thing I'm talking about, your game has become boring because you as a person running it, or a player, you're no longer inspired. You've spent your imagination. You've run out of imagination, and it's imagination and the cool stuff created by your imagination. That's the fuel of your game. If you're running on empty, my guess is the game is, in its death throes. There you go. So how's it to do with the system? That's my challenge. And think about some evidence when we're talking about this stuff. Just look at it. What games have you played in that have lasted a long time? Well, I've been in Kevin Madison's Ash game ages. I think it was coming on for 2 years. I've had to step away for a little while. Hopefully, and he assures me it will still be there when I come back, and I'm ready to come back. Likewise, John Large, he runs a long and steady game. And it's because these guys have got a wealth of imagination. They're drawing from a massive resource of ideas, and they're constantly looking and plugging things into their game. So Kev's running Ash, John's running Old School Essentials, but it's D&D, and Ash is a bit more of a sort of a slightly more complicated game, and D&D, as we know, at its heart, it's a pretty simple game. And the legs for those campaigns, very little to do with the system, and I would say at this point, I'm gonna come out and say nothing to do with the system. If you regard the system as sort of really the rules and the mechanisms that make up that game, the procedures. Some games, like I say, they give you a bit more to grab onto in terms of setting and lore and things like that, and that's the type of thing that I think does contribute way more. And I wouldn't really call that system, but I acknowledge that is debatable. So it comes down to that old classic, how you set it up. So your play style, your players, your group, your time, your imagination. Whilst we've got a minute and I'm on a roll, I've been kayaking. Good news, I've been on the River Frome, down in Wareham, Dorset. Took the family down there. We took out a couple of double kayaks and a single. Had a couple of hours paddling about in a super historical place. Wareham, set up by the Saxons. There was a settlement there prior to this. But if you want to see some nice architecture, you want to see the Riverside Quay where we launched. I mean, they got untold stone churches. I think I counted 4 old stone churches in this small town. I think it'd make a really nice setting. Check it out on Wikipedia, or your sort of use your search engine of choice. I'm into my DuckDuckGo at the moment. That's a shameless plug for DuckDuckGo, serving me well, and quite appropriate, because there is plenty of ducks down in Wareham. Awesome place, super inspiring, and yes, kayaking. Beautiful day, nice bit of exercise. I can heartily recommend a paddle on the river to anybody who's that way inclined. Regular listeners will know that is something I've been meaning to do for ages. Got some developments on my River Lee idea as well. I might try and tie it in with Father's Day, do a bit of walking, follow that path along the River Lee, which is a river local to me. I might, oh, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I might even bust out the BMX. Oh yes, how crazy is that? BMX indeed. And the other thing, the last thing, I was just pondering this idea of, there's been quite a bit of talk about minimal games and minimal gaming. And I've been wondering about, how I set myself up. And I use a DM's notebook. I've got one for when I'm a DM, one for when I'm a player. And I can grab that and go. That's got everything I need in there. If I want a bit more stuff, I'll probably turn to the Black Hack box set. Another good go-to kind of minimal setup. For me, it's got to be no electronics. I can't be tied to a power source, even if it's solar, and I want stuff that's low tech, that is pretty indestructible. It's not going to break down, not going to let you down, you're not going to have technical difficulties with it. So a DM's notebook, that's perfection for me. And whilst you're putting that together, I wondered about this idea of using a database, something I don't know a lot about, and printing information for different things like monsters or characters, NPCs, and just printing them in a template from a database onto Avery postage labels. And then you can stick them labels, well, you can stick them where you want. Oh dear, I might have been in the sun too long again. Occupational hazard, I'm afraid. But yeah, uses for Avery labels. I'd be interested if anybody's tried that, if they think there's some mileage to it. It's a bit of a spin on the note card in some ways, which is another thing. I like that note card. A few of them thrown in with my DM's book, set of dice, boom, you're good to go. So I apologise, this is a little bit disjointed. I'm just jumping in and out of the van throughout the day with my thoughts. The thing that happens is you talk about something, then you mull it over a bit more and realise perhaps there's a bit more to say. And what I wanted to say was I realised I didn't really acknowledge anybody for this chain of thought that's been triggered off in my head. So big shout out to Jason, Nerds RPG Variety Cast. He was talking about, he's been talking about in his most latest episodes, his most recent episodes, he's been talking about sci-fi games. My ears pricked up, of course, at the moment, just playing in D6 Star Wars with my brother running it. But he mentioned Lasers and Feelings. He didn't talk much about it, but it came up, and I thought, you know what, there's absolutely no reason why Lasers and Feelings, which is basically Star Trek, why that can't go on and on and on. Because look at the TV show. I'm not a Trekkie. I like it, but when I say I'm not a Trekkie, I don't know the ins and outs of it all. But I know there's loads of it. And you could more or less, just mine all those TV episodes and bring them into your games. So yeah, it's super simple, one page of rules. But look what they've done with Star Trek. What was the premise of that? Bunch of folks floating about on a spaceship, exploring, and I can't remember the blurb, but you know what I mean. The other person I want to credit, and he got me a little bit by surprise, was old Spencer, aka Free For All, Keep Off the Borderlands, talking about his game, Son Ich Pura. And he'd said, now hold on, I don't know if it is Pura now. Dang. Well, he's got a game out, and he was explaining that it was kind of designed for one shots. Now he did say it's designed for one shot, so he's not ruling out any idea that you could play for longer. But he'd said his explanation, and he expounded on this by saying that it was designed that you play this character that it's one night in a character's life. And that immediately made me think, well, yeah, and the next time you could play, you could just do another night in their life, and so on and so forth. And it'd be like one of these old children's TV programs you may have heard of, called Jamie and the Magic Torch, which was a program that was on when I was a kid. He got up in the night, he had like a torch that he shone on the floor, and the floor opened up to a kind of magical, wacky, alternate world, another dimension perhaps. And you know, you could do that time and time again, and that's exactly what Jamie did. You went on his magical adventures with his magic torch. And I just want to, at this point, round about the same time, big shout out for Mr. Ben. Hey, Mr. Ben. Folks of a certain age will know Mr. Ben. And I had a big idea the other day of pondering about Mr. Ben that I was going to talk about on the podcast. And do you think I can remember what that was? Dang. But Mr. Ben is awesome. Jamie and the Magic Torch is awesome. Spencer and Jason, also awesome. Got me thinking again. Got that old grey matter churning over, talking about RPGs. By now you're thinking, is this bloke ever gonna shut up? But the other thing I forgot, of course, a little bit oversimplifying this idea of longevity and replayability, I made no mention of the thing that I reckon some of these bigger companies do, and it's about buy-in, getting you to buy in, either, and perhaps in the case of the person buying the materials, customarily this will be the DM, buying in financially, or, and I don't think this is quite as powerful, but it can be, emotional buy-in from people invested in a narrative, or invested in characters, invested in the world. So once you've got that buy-in, you've got people sort of hooked into the game, you're onto a winner. The tricky one is the financial buy-in, because I'll give you an example. I bought in quite heavily into 5th edition, and then kind of trickled in funds gradually as they made releases. So at this point, I'm left into the game for a good few £100, really, as sort of a sunk cost. Now, am I just going to sort of stop playing that game because I want to play something else and leave all that investment? Well, I'm the sort of person who's not really want to get some value for it. So probably, and this is something I'm considering that I might have to do to kind of get over this, is just sort of sell some of them books. Would that really be a problem? I don't think so. It might be good for me. It might be good for me to shake that off a little bit. I'll keep some of the main kind of rule books for my kids, my family, but say Curse of Strahd, I can't really see me getting to that. I really like it as well, but I just can't see me getting to run it. Might as well sell it. Likewise, the Giants, the Tiamat one, a bunch of those adventures I just don't think I'm going to get round to. I'll probably keep Ravnica. I think I'll keep Eberron, just because I've never explored them worlds and I haven't read those books yet either. Xanathars, yeah, I'm not massive on Xanathars. I like the downtime bit, but I can access this stuff through D&D Beyond, so it might be time to move them on. But buy in, really, sort of that investment really keeps people coming back to a game and giving it legs, because you're providing stuff for people to consume. People like to kind of get into the hobby, spend their pennies on it, get more stuff, and you've got to keep feeding that as a company to give a game another kind of replayability and longevity. And don't talk to me about player options either. I know player options is a thing, but I want to bundle that in with imagination. I haven't mentioned player options, and that is one of them things that gets wheeled out. Oh, this game's got more replayability because of the player options. You can, if you're playing Tunnel Goons, your players can do whatever they like. I think that's a sort of a sales issue. You got to sell the idea to your players and tell them that, because if they look at the rules, they don't see all these options. So once again it's a bit of that inspiration and imagination. I think I am finally done talking about this. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.